Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with the Beginner's Guide to Total War Warhammer. One of the quickest ways to learn what you're up against on the fly is to look at a unit's type. In the heat of battle, you can see this for your own units on their cards, on the flags that your and your enemy's troops carry, or as icons floating above units when you hold spacebar, or always if you lock them as active in the spacebar menu. All the information in this video is based on the game as of an unmodded release, before all the DLC starts. I do feel like these could be a bit more generic. They get a little bit too specific, and that's going to make this video longer than I'd like it to be. Important to note, basically all units have an armor piercing stat. However, if they're not listed as armor piercing units, this stat is negligible. Lords. Make sure you read the actual unit descriptor, because it specifies what type of warrior they are, despite giving them all the same icon, an 8-pointed star. I know it looks different, but why use an 8-pointed star when that's a reference to chaos in this lore? Oh well. Hero, melee, and missile specialists. These guys have their own icons depending on the faction we're talking about. Each is also unique in terms of abilities. Nothing in common here apart from the fact that they're heroes. Hero spellcasters. Wizards, sorcerers, shamans, vampires. The icon determines their lore specialization, and that in turn affects the kind of magic available to them. This warns you about certain combatants. For example, keep your armored units away from a Lore of Metal hero lest they cast Plague of Rust and reduce your armor quality. I'll be making a detailed magic video soon, and I'll cover all these details then. Spears. These guys have extra reach with their weapons, making them great against larger foes, whether that's cavalry, monsters, or beasts, but less effective against sword and axe wielders. They typically all have charge defense against large as well, though Bretonia's spearmen have charge defense against all, and Goblin spearmen don't have charge defense at all. Halberds. Just like spears, these guys have extra reach, giving them the same benefits and pitfalls. They all have charge defense against large, while Bretonian halberdiers have charge defense against all. Halberds also have high armor piercing. This means they're great against armored opponents, but typically less cost efficient against unarmored units. Swords. These are well-balanced units, meant for hand-to-hand combat, excellent for taking care of spearmen especially. Great swords. These are also well-balanced units for hand-to-hand combat, but with armor-piercing weapons. That means they're great against armored opponents, but less cost-effective against unarmored units. Axe. Another average frontline soldier. When costs are similar to sword infantry, they tend to have better armor-piercing and offensive stats, but with lower defensive stats. Great Axe. Armor piercing makes them excellent against armored units, but less cost efficient against unarmored units. Their fighting skill is a little lower than regular axes, but each hit does more damage. Pickaxe. These guys are great for breaking down gates and piercing armor, but otherwise are pretty mediocre. Hammer. Extremely good at armor penetration, and they deal a lot of damage. Cudgel. Do a decent amount of damage to unarmored units. Scythe. Defensively very poor, but proficient at piercing armor. Don't waste money using them against unarmored units. Missile. Range units that can't do well in melee, but dwarves can manage. Remember, the weapon determines the firing angle. Guns shoot straight, arrows can be shot in arcs. Flamethrower. Self-explanatory. They have flamethrowers. Very short range, very damaging, including explosive damage. Torpedo. With a medium range, these guys fire explosive missiles with explosive damage. Cavalry. Fast and great against smaller targets. Regular cavalry does better in melee than shock cavalry. Keep your eye on the icon. It determines the mount and the weapon, both of which affect the unit based on the other icons I describe in this video. Shock cavalry. Excellent charge bonuses. Make sure you don't keep them in prolonged melee as that's not their strong suit. Missile cavalry. Fast-moving, ranged support units. Terrible in melee and great for harassment and goading the enemy into action. Keep an eye on the bow and arrow versus the guns or axes or javelins. Check out my video about hit-and-run tactics for some ideas on how to use them. Chariot. Fast-moving, but with a large turning radius. These guys can cut through enemy infantry lines very easily, but are extremely weak when stuck in prolonged combat. They also come as missile variants. Flying cavalry. It looks like they're very sticky and are hard to disengage once in melee. Otherwise, they're just like cavalry, but with wings for much better mobility. War Beast. Fast, with decent amount of damage done to unarmored units, largely ineffective against armored units though. Flying War Beast. Basically War Beasts with better maneuverability. Monstrous infantry. They cause fear, are extremely damaging, and are classified as large. Flying monstrous infantry. Just like monstrous infantry, but with better mobility. Monster. There are a couple different icons. A large foot means it's a giant, whereas a weird webbed foot suggests it's something else. Nonetheless, these are frightening, terrifying, and highly damaging. Flying monster. Frightening and terrifying with high damage and powerful against large units as well. Also, wings for greater mobility. Gigantic spider. The spider icon here and under cavalry means that speed and combat stats are not affected by difficult terrain. Also, the Arachnarok spider causes fear. Dragon ogres. Frightening units that cause a fair bit of damage, resistant to missile attacks because of their scaly skin. Dragon ogre Shaggoth. Frightening and terrifying units that cause tremendous amounts of damage, also resistant to missile attacks due to scaly skin. Catapult. Not very accurate siege equipment, but great for firing in arcs over your own lines, terrain, your enemy, and their walls. Siege artillery. Accurate pieces with extremely high amounts of damage dealt in a concentrated area. They can also slow down large beasts by making them topple over, but don't necessarily cause the most damage to them. Rocket battery. Explosive damage and a decent rate of fire with very low accuracy. But when you can cause this much widespread damage, who cares for accuracy? Seriously though, beware of friendly fire. Field gun. Great for use against enemy units. Thin down numbers of charging infantry and cavalry quickly. War machine. Extremely tough weapon of war, armored and armor-piercing, all while causing a great deal of damage in general. The steam tank can also melee when in close range. Flying war machine. Dwarven flying war machines are equipped with guns and bombs. They can also melee when out of ammo. Make sure to use the unit ability at the bottom left to drop bombs. Magic chariot. They use magic to fight and to support nearby units with an aura. Great support units that can also hold their own for the most part. Yes, it's a lot of information, but being able to identify what you're up against at a glance gives you the upper hand. On the battlefield, snap decisions need to be made all the time. Getting those decisions right makes a difference between a victory and a loss, and that's what being a great general is about. For more tips and tricks, subscribe to this channel, and if there's something you'd like to see covered, let me know in the comments below.